So hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A pleasure to be able to speak to both of you about this incredible documentary. Maybe for people who don't know anything about it, you could just kick off with a brief introduction. What can people expect if they watch it?
Yeah, sure. So we are the directors of Rebellion, and we essentially met the co-founders of Extinction Rebellion back in 2018. And it was a time we didn't really know who they were. No one really did. And they talked about planning a rebellion. And so we thought, okay, well, that sounds interesting. We'll stick around. And we started following them. So the film, we kind of let the story unfold, essentially. We very much were on the inside. So we follow them through the highs. We celebrate collective action in the film, but we also get into the lows and some of the difficulties with movement building, especially such a fast growing movement like Extinction Rebellion. And then we end up in the present day with this police bill that's now coming through, which is very much a response to effective protests like XR. Really they're trying to encroach on it and essentially silence protesters. And it's also, we sort of, because we focus on a few key people, we sort of made sure that we followed some of the more personal stories as well. So it doesn't just become a sort of political piece. So it very much weaves the two throughout. And we thought that was important because there are just, I think a lot of stereotypes around activists and ideas of, what they're like and sort of being preachy and worthy. And actually we found a lot of the people we were with had a lot of humility, and there were all sorts of ideas and experiences they were having. And so we wanted to capture some of that side of it as well and let people into that.
So and a lot of them were also doing it for the first time in their lives, which was really compelling. And, it was the first time that we were doing it too. So that felt like an important angle as well.
And so obviously when you started to film, you had no idea kind of what the finished product could even look like, because you didn't even know what was going to happen. So what kind of sparked your initial interest in the group? And, what idea did you have in your head to begin with? And did you have to just kind of wait it out and see where it went? How did you then begin to form, I guess, the narrative arc that we then see in the final film?
I mean, I think it's very difficult with like observational documentaries to ever know where you're headed when you start. I think if you did, it would be difficult to kind of have to wait it out for so long. But I think what I said before, like one of the things that really struck us and we were really compelled by from the very beginning was that there were just so many people saying I've never done anything like this before, but I've felt paralyzed for so many years and I just don't know what to do, and so like I'm putting my energy behind this, and that felt really amazing. And then also very quickly we met Roger and Gail, who were two of the co-founders, and they were also really charismatic and so committed, and then quite quickly after that we met Farhana Yamin, who's this like incredible international climate lawyer who's essentially been, working at the heart of the UN for 3 decades, trying to solve this. And she was going, those of us on the inside, like this process that's meant to solve this problem is not working. So I'm putting my weight behind this. And that felt like a big moment of like, oh, okay, wow, like if these people that are coming at it from so many different angles are coming together to work on this, then, we want to stick around and see what happens. So I think some of those storylines, we really wanted to follow from the very beginning. And then there are other storylines that kind of emerged more organically.
We started meeting more of the younger activists as we filmed. So by the summer of 2019, that was really a moment where XR Youth had formed, and they had quite a different idea of how to do things to some of the co-founders. And so that was quite an interesting dynamic, especially as Savannah, the first time we met Savannah, I think she was only 19 at the time, was the moment where she essentially confronts the main team and says, guys, the way we're doing things, it's not okay. The power dynamics here are really off and this needs to shift. That was actually Elena was there filming, had literally never met Savannah before. And then there she was having this very powerful position, suddenly coming forward with these different ideas. And so that was we ended up on it was a big journey for us as well. It kind of had twists and turns that we weren't expecting, and there was also a personal side for that with Savannah, because Roger Hallam, one of the co-founders, is also her dad, and so there was that dynamic as well, that we then realized, okay, well, we need to spend time with Savannah and really understand where she's coming from and unpack this. It did require us to sort of keep showing up and really get to know people. So we were really conscious of you know, capturing as much of the complexity as we could. I mean, that's tricky in 80 minutes. Ultimately, film's only 80 minutes, but yeah, we did our best to, like, you know, really dig down into what was going on.
And what about some of the logistics of filming? Because I know when you cut it down to 80 minutes, but you probably had hours and hours and hours of footage, both from the meetings, but then also being out on these protests. So what were some of maybe like the highlights and challenges of actually capturing all that?
I think we have over 400 hours of footage. I think Maya's calculated it at some point. I mean, I think, you know, the logistics, you know, the main challenges making this film is, like, you know, one, filming activists, because they're very busy people. And so we were always kind of like getting last minute texts and having to run across London to film a last minute meeting and all of that. And then in the edit, the most challenging thing was weaving, you know, the political with the personal. But in terms of logistics, you know, I think that there's kind of a new generation of filmmakers now where I feel like if you've started making films in the last 10 years and you're making them independently, chances are that you're filming and mostly editing them yourselves until you have money to get an editor. And that, you know, we wouldn't have been able to make this film if both of us weren't also shooting and, you know, doing a lot of editing. And I think that's just kind of a reality nowadays, and being two of us massively helped as well, because, you know, we could kind of divide and conquer.
Yeah, definitely.
And, you know, what was it like? Because I remember watching this, you know, it's obviously not that long ago, and I remember feeling really taken aback by just how what was it 2018, the big April 2019, sorry, how it just exploded, and it did really capture the kind of the imagination of the public. I felt like everyone really was behind it, which I think if you'd asked people, you know, going back even a year before that or a few years before that, they would have said anyone would have support for that, not on that scale. It was kind of, you know, like sort of these hippie, is it Boris Johnson was used to call them like crusties or something like this. There was definitely
uncooperative crusties.
Uncooperative crusties. But, you know, it suddenly felt mainstream, and it felt like it was a really community thing. So I mean, I guess that's like also golden from a perspective of a filmmaker, because like, wow, look at this amazing movement that we've been able to capture. But were you yourselves taken aback by just how much it galvanized the public?
Oh, yeah, totally. I wept actually at the end of the April Rebellion. I mean, I think both of us cried a lot through the making of this film, but they were like tears of joy, because actually the day when the emergency declaration was declared by the UK Parliament just felt so surreal because, you know, having been with someone like Farhana, with lots of the group 6 months before, saying, you know, how are we going to do this? How are we going to, you know, essentially the government's just not listening, not prioritizing it. People are not talking about climate like they should. They're not talking about this in the way that they should be. This is an emergency. How do we make this happen? And then 6 months later, off the back of that, those amazing protests, that massive disobedience in April, to then be in a room with government and you know, have Farhana putting that to go, you know, what's going on? Why aren't you declaring an emergency? And of course, it wasn't the government that then declared it. It was actually Parliament, but government didn't block it. But yeah, it just, and then seeing the ripple effect of that, then hearing lots of groups and you know, in many different industries, you know, picking up that language, and then that catalyzing, you know, energy and action, and people wanting to actually do something about it was very exciting. And then it also, then we, you know, then things actually got very difficult, because where do you go next? And so then it was sort of emotional in a different way, because it was like, oh, you know, brought together all these people and we've been on such a high, and then now things are really difficult, like continuing that momentum and with lots of new people joining was so difficult. So I think we felt like we went on that roller coaster as well, definitely.
Yeah, it almost felt then, for all the achievements and, you know, all that momentum that was built up, it then all felt like it started to disintegrate. And there were a few kind of bad, like, if you want to say, like PR you know, stunts that sort of backfired, you know, with like the Heathrow and the drones and the DLR. So does it also make you realize that, you know, it can all sort of turn on a dime, and that must be so hard for people who dedicate their lives to such causes, that it's really not something that you can ever feel like you've made it, that they do have to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the life of an activist is a life of dedicating your time and energy to something that you're, most likely not going to see the results of in your lifetime. And I think people who often go into it knowing that, and what fuels them is something else. It's, feeling like they're doing the right thing. But also I think it's not quite like so black and white. And I think that's also partly the responsibility of like mainstream media that do jump on those things instead of celebrating all the other things that happen. And like XR expanded into so many territories, and there are so many local regional groups doing amazing things where they're taking like specific actions that are specific to them, but also they're organized in a kind of really clever way where, like they now have a network of people that can be called on to support other protests, to support other movements, to be called into London if they need to be. But then also it's a group of people that are there, are connected, can support each other, in protest and otherwise, which is what we need more of in society anyways. And I think, yeah, it's such a shame when those things get completely overshadowed by the kind of actions that the media jump on. And I think having Discord in a group as big as XR is the most normal thing in the world. And that's also why we wanted to capture it in the film, to show that, that messiness doesn't mean that it's not working. That messiness is life, and that's fine. And actually in that messiness, you can also have a lot of creativity come out of it. And yeah, like, like I said before, like flawed humans can still make change, and, it has been that way always.
Yeah. And I think on that note, you don't shy away, I guess, both on the kind of personal level, like the relationship between Roger and his daughter, and even I'm sorry, I'm going to forget her name, the lawyer sort of saying, Roger's great on motivating people, but light on detail. So, there's a lot of kind of honesty like about the flaws and the difficulties. And, sometimes having mixed messages that, it's true, even when they're given a platform on news channels, because it's quite a democratic organization, there's not sort of, key leadership all the time, that it doesn't always come across as they want it to. So I think, was it important to provide that balance and provide all the nuance of the story?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think, people do have a lot of assumptions about a group like XR. And the media doesn't help, but also XR would often outwardly present, very clearly on certain messages, but actually a lot of that debate that was going on the inside, people weren't aware of, and we were capturing it because we were there, with our cameras in a lot of those long meetings and listening to all these different viewpoints. And we found that really fascinating. We're like, actually, everyone should be aware of this. So I think it's quite easy to sort of stand on the sidelines and critique a group like this and just think, well, they haven't got this right, they haven't got that right, there's all these problems. And actually we were like, well, no, there are people in here who also see all those things, and they're just working together to try and, make something come of it, rather than just standing back and, taking shots at it. And that was something that all the people we followed did, so we had a lot of respect for that, because that's hard work. It's really hard, but it's always, like Elena was saying, that's the deal. When you're bringing lots of different people together, there is always going to be that, back and forth and different ideas. And so Elena, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I just think that, me and Maia were also seeing from very early on like a kind of very homogenous depiction of XR, which we didn't feel matched what we were seeing on the inside, and being in those meetings and being in those rooms. So we really wanted to capture that. And I think, to think that thousands of people could come together and all of them are going to agree on everything is ludicrous. Of course, there's going to be disagreements. It's how you deal with them. And how you move forward that matters, not the fact that they're there.
Yeah, and actually that then was, I think, one of the bigger issues for Extinction Rebellion was the decision-making processes weren't quite there yet. And it was sort of, because everything was happening so quickly, and suddenly you've got loads of new members, and like, how do you account for that? How do you bring their views in? And that, so because in a way, no one in that summer of 2019, no one really won. Because the people who were pushing forward with the plan kind of got delayed, and then everyone else got frustrated because they didn't have space for other ideas, and it kind of went on and on. So I think that is something that I guess movements are constantly grappling with, like, how do we like react to things and be able to move quickly, but also how do we make sure we're democratic and like not let people get left behind and frustrated, and then we lose people. And that is a constant struggle. We didn't go into that in the film because we thought, I mean, we could have made a film that was just for activists, and that was, you know, really, we got into the nitty-gritty of that, and I think it was a good thing we didn't, because we wanted other people to watch it. And our editor, we were sort of saying, should we talk about the media coordinator and then the actions? And he was like, no terminology, please don't get bogged down in that, like let's not. But that is all, it is all really interesting, that side of it.
And I think it sort of gets to the heart of why these issues have become stagnated in conferences and in politics, because they're unbelievably complex. And you can see that even, you know, as XR tries to, you know, evolve, and it's like, okay, well, like, you know, all these other issues, you know, like about racism and, you know, climate justice, you know, and where like materials are being sourced in Africa. And you can feel that you could so easily become overwhelmed and kind of just sort of switch off, which I think probably is what happens to people. So you do need that balance, and you do need some people sometimes to kind of pick an issue and run with it. And I wonder if there's something in that about the whole idea of activism. But if we all just kind of waited till we had all the answers, then we would never see any change.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to say as well that, you know, like in 2018, when that really damning IPCC report came out, XR was actually one of the only groups having an emergency reaction to it. They were like, let's do something about this, you know, let's not organize another conference to talk about it, or, you know, do more talks or go on a march. Like, this is a critical point, and no one is reacting with an emergency reaction. And, you know, that was the reason why, for example, someone like Farhana was like, okay, these guys are having an appropriate reaction, I'm going to join them. So definitely there is a thing about just, you know, taking action. But then with what you're saying, you know, obviously there's so many issues. And, you know, I was just talking about this yesterday, that often I think it can be really overwhelming for people to think that they have to put the burden of solving this on their shoulders, you know. And it's like, you can be one piece of the puzzle. There's so many other pieces. Like, you don't need to, if you don't want to join XR, don't join XR. There's so many other amazing groups doing incredible things. Just like work with each other, you know. And we wanted to make a film for people who, so that people at the very least, you know, will do a double take the next time that they read a very reductive headline about activists, and can just kind of see them as people that they can also go to the pub and have a beer with, and are very normal and are just incredibly committed. But it doesn't mean that they have to do the same thing that they're doing. They could choose something else. You know, Farhana says everyone should have activist in their CV. And that can be in whatever way you feel you have capacity to do that.
Almost apathy is the worst thing to have, you know, just, you know, find something that you care about and try and do something about it rather than switching off.
Yeah, and I think often, like, that's also a function of the way that the media portrays a lot of people, but, like, you know, in this case activists, where they're often either like heroes or villains, which is again why we wanted to get the personal through, and the struggles and the flaws and the arguments, right? Because the problem with that narrative is that, well, if someone's a hero, then you think, I'm not a hero, so I can't do that. And if they're a villain, then you say, well, I don't agree with them because they're a villain, so I'm not going to do anything. End result being, you don't do anything. So it's much better to just see people as people, normal people, and you can also contribute.
Yeah, totally.
What do you hope the impact of the film to be in that sense? Because I think it is incredibly inspirational, but it also ends on perhaps an uneasy note. Because for all the sort of joy and elation of that moment, you know, back in 2019, we're now in a place where rules are just tightening and becoming more draconian, and not something that I feel like we as British people recognize as something that how our society would react to things like this. So it feels also like a very worrying moment. So where do you want people to sort of land when they get to the end of your film?
Yeah, well, I think, and also because we've had a few years now of largely being apart from each other and not having these moments of collectivity and coming together. So I think, firstly, we wanted the film, I think, to really show the importance of protest and like the joy of it and what we can achieve when we work together, and remember that special time in 2019, capture some of that energy again and hope to reignite it. and then I guess it would be easy potentially to sort of see the police bill and these moves to silence protest and put a stop to it as quite deflating and quite demotivating. But I think actually what we've seen is that a lot of different groups have rallied together to push back against this bill, and that we found really inspiring, that people went, actually, you know what, we're gonna protest to defend the right to protest, like we're gonna keep going and we're gonna work together to do that. So we just hope that people can actually, although be quite worried about it, they can then turn that worry into sort of anger and a sense of like wanting to get up and do something about it, and not just let it happen, not just sit back and go, that's fine, let's carry on down that road, because that's not a nice road to be on. We're heading towards authoritarianism, essentially. It's even just someone with a placard making noise in Parliament Square that could be at risk. Protests are deemed too noisy, they get shut down. Like, protests are noisy, inherently noisy, that's the point. So it sort of, we hope that actually what it will do is put a bit of fire in people's bellies, make them aware of it and ready to fight.
And I think also it's important to kind of always make the point that these this bill is being sold as kind of in part being put in place to deal with groups like XR, but actually the police already have the laws in place to deal with groups like XR. They already have laws in place that can mean that they can arrest someone if they glue themselves to the road, lock on, whatever they decide to do. So it's it's affecting everyday citizens that wouldn't even consider themselves activists, like just going to a protest, not to mention all the other groups that are going to be affected by it as well, like the Roma and traveler communities and so many other groups. So it's just like really, really scary, and I think more people need to realize that it's going to affect them too.
And when you were making the film, did you ever think, like, for yourselves personally, that they were going too far? Like, did you have your own personal opinions? Because of course it's observational, so the lens is neutral in a way, but did you have your own opinions about it?
Oh yeah, we constantly were, throwing our hands up and like, oh no, not this, not that, what are they doing now? And then at other times being like, actually, why not go for it? Like, we found ourselves pulled in different directions the whole time, which was what made it interesting, and what made us realize, like, it's not fair actually to be super critical of people, because at least they're trying, and it is difficult. We could always see both sides of the argument and understand why people were doing it, even if maybe the tactic itself, we were like, I'm not sure if that is the right target. It is complicated, and the more people we have like trying to get involved, I think, and work it out, the better, rather than just having a knee-jerk reaction and writing them off. So we did try and I think we vented to each other a lot. It was nice to have the other to, like, share those feelings with, and then we'd like calm down and be like, okay, get our rational side.
So I think like if it's taught me anything, it's taught me so many things, but one of the big things that I'm also taking away from making this film and having spent 3.5 years with XR is that I think also, especially nowadays with social media and all these things, we're just so primed to have like hot takes on everything and see things very black and white, and that's just like, there's just always more nuance to every single story, and actually taking the time to explore that nuance and think about what story am I being sold, and I'm sure that there's something more, so I'm gonna try and dig into that before creating like a super strong opinion that I'm now going to defend.
And I'm almost out of time, but very quickly, how does it feel for it to be going on Netflix? It's going on Netflix, right? So obviously, kind of almost what feels like an unlimited audience. And then just quickly, if you're going to work on another documentary next, you can tell us a bit about that.
I think it's still, even though it's 2 days now until it goes on Netflix, I think it hasn't sunk in that that's where it's going. That feels very surreal, and really exciting. It's just I hope people do pick it up and watch it and find it, because we didn't opt for Netflix branded, so it's very much down to us to sort of sound the bells for it and be like, guys, it's on there, go watch it. But I think also the exciting thing about it going up there is that then people can put on their own viewings with it. It allows it to just be, you know, something that's very readily accessible, and people can do what they want with the film, rather than it, because I think so often with documentaries it is so hard to find them. You know, people will say, have you seen this, have you seen that, and it's like, oh no, I haven't, where do I find it? And then it's sort of a nightmare looking for it. So I think that I'm glad that it's going to be very easy once you know it's on there to get to. I think that's so important. In terms of what next,
I mean, this is still a full-time job for us. We're doing this every single day. We're self-releasing, you know. Maia's doing about 7 people's jobs at the same time. I've been away every single day for the last like 12 days. It's, you know, doing Q&As everywhere. It's very much like still a full-time job for us. So it feels a bit impossible to think about something else.
Yeah. Well, enjoy this moment, enjoy it getting on Netflix and the attention and starting a conversation, which I think films like this, you know, that's also a massive thing about it. It's just getting people talking about it and thinking about it, you know, it's already,
and that has happened. Like every single Q&A that I've done afterwards, people have been talking outside the cinema, and you know, that's really been happening, and kind of going quite in depth with it, and that's really encouraging, and that's why we made it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think I'm out of time, but it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to both of you. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And best of luck with the release. Hope everyone can go and click on it, or go out and see it. Go and click on it on the All right, have a lovely day.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thanks. Bye.